Thank you very much. Hello all. First of all, it's probably useful to say that my perspective is not really insurance, and it's also not really collision repair industry. My background is predominantly assistance products around building them for consumers. So I'm a consumer or driver advocate. My co-founder, he has 25 years insurance expertise going back to the start of telematics. So he's the telematics expert. Now, telematics is essentially split into two. The way I see it, it's split into two. You have the pricing, the data for pricing side of it, and you have the other side of it, which is instrumental in supporting drivers when they need it. Now, as David said, eCall sits in the latter half of it. eCall is a solution that's been talked about for 12, 13 years. And in principle, it's a technology that's put inside cars, normally at manufacturing stage, that allows a driver to accelerate support when they really need it. It's an automatic alert to emergency services. It pinpoints the location, and it shortens the time, which, if you've all heard of the golden hour, essentially it's the hour, the most important hour in terms of damage to the individual person, etc. Now, eCall still isn't in most vehicles. In fact, eCall is only, or similar solutions, are only in prestige vehicles. So, from my perspective, I question that, because surely there's technology out there that will allow us to do something similar or better in the short term. Now, if you look at eCall, the business model itself, the more times the investment case is done, the poorer the return on investment seems to be. Now, at the moment, the cost vastly outweighs the benefit as per the credit card, but it's just a stage thing. So I can see eCall and solutions that help drivers at the point of need in a collision within the next 4 to 5 years penetrating a bigger majority of the market. But in the meantime, there's a lot of drivers, the majority, that aren't getting the support when they need it. Now, obviously, it's not just the drivers that need it. It impacts what I call the recovery team. Now, the recovery team, insurers, roadside assistance, collision repair, and emergency services. So all those people can be supported if there's some system available at the point of collision or near the point of collision. So, putting an entrepreneurial hat on, I've been an entrepreneur for some time now. I went into the corporate world as well, and I was, for 3 years, the director of innovation for the world's biggest construction company, Vinci. And most of my work was looking at ways of innovating to change behaviours about people being safe on site. And it was an incredibly difficult job. And we've got behavioural psychologists, we've got so many clever ways of doing things. But ultimately, the only way to do that was to get people incentivized, to get people to want to behave better. So, founding in Deninson, we had my business partner with telematics pricing. We had me wanting to reduce accidents or at least accelerate recovery from them. We had these debates. Some of these issues have come up today in terms of where insurers see the short-term value and where the risks are. And we came down with risk in terms of excessive costs, fraud, and so on and so forth around collisions. And the cost, I think the average cost in the UK, for instance, for an insurer, overpaying on an average crash is about £700. So it's a significant excessive spend. So we decided to look at the collision side of the issue. Now, the problem is technology costs. And as we've seen with eCall, it's cost so much money to embed this technology into vehicles. So, if I can just go to here. Now, looking at an occasional entrepreneur, as I call it, if you ask an entrepreneur today, 2013, especially a technology or a consumer-focused entrepreneur, this is the challenge. How do we solve it? Now, these guys reinvent business models on a daily basis. And these guys will come forward with lots and lots and lots of solutions, saying, you can do this, you can do that. But essentially, most of the solutions will come down to, well, what currently is available in terms of technology? Now, currently, the technology available to most drivers is a smartphone. And I think we've sort of covered that partly on the previous presentation. But the problem with technology is that there's still a missing link. And that missing link is that the driver is in control of the technology. Now, in a collision scenario, the driver is panicking. The driver is ill-equipped, and the driver is just uninformed. They don't know what to do. They're heading down a certain road, going to work, going to visit friends, and all of a sudden that's impacted. It stops. They panic. So even if there was a smartphone solution in the car, most drivers wouldn't use it. Now, that's been proven through, when I worked at AXA, for instance, they developed lots of what they call accident apps. You've probably seen accident apps on the App Store. You're supposed to press the button and you get FNOL and triage. But again, what's the incentive for the driver to install it, let alone use it? So anyway, that's what's at stake for the driver, for the emergency services, the insurers, and the collision repair industry. So the goal is somehow to calm the driver down and to help the driver do what they need to do at the point of a collision, to support insurers, to support the collision repair industry, and so on and so forth. So what we need is something a little bit special, a little bit different. So this chapter essentially is about searching for a superhero. Now, as we said before, loads of technology out there, loads of attempts at getting it right, but the big problem with most is cost, whereas smartphones is a little bit different. It's more accessible. But how can we make smartphones bridge the gap, essentially? What's so great about smartphones? Well, smartphones, people love them. They're a powerful technology in their own right. They're portable, they're connected, and also they're becoming a window on our digital lives. Clearly, the problems, battery life, and also driver distraction. Increasingly, there's concern from regulatory bodies, media, and so on and so forth, that these small 4- 5-inch screens with these tiny icons right over here cause accidents. And there's evidence that they do. So these, I would say, are manageable. There are certain technologies and software platforms that have been built that will help this. For instance, the MirrorLink is a solution that mirrors literally your smartphone on a 6, 7, 8-inch screen. But again, it suffers the cost factor. They're an aftermarket or an OEM solution, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. So what can smartphones do in terms of supporting the collision recovery? Well, they're present at a lot of incidents. Currently, the smartphone penetration of a decent quality of smartphone is about 40-50%. In some countries, it's 60%. Over the next few years, it will be more than that. They're easily triggered. There are powerful technologies inside, accelerometers, are using GPS that will allow the smartphone essentially to understand its situation and come to the driver to say, how can I help? And if you put a clever software layer in between that, it can say, I assume you need this support. Press here to contact your insurer and get immediate FNOL and triage. Those technologies are here today to be able to do that. Also, they provide a really useful interface on what to do at the right time for the insurer and all the other recovery team. And again, they provide great tools to gather data. Even the simple camera allows lots of useful information. And this helps in fraud, reducing fraud, obviously more accurate and quicker estimates. A few of the examples, I mentioned accident apps already. Telematic apps, they were mentioned earlier as well. In the UK, they're looking at building a 999 app. Now, if you think about it, I don't know if it's the same in the UK as it is elsewhere, but when you call from a mobile, it roams, and the police lose the location of that originating phone. So that causes problems. So what we're working at now is looking at embedding a piece of software in the phone at manufacture that sends a packet of data to say that this guy is here, and it helps the police actually pinpoint that individual. So, as we said earlier, the biggest issue with smartphones is getting someone to use a collision recovery service. With telematics, the problem isn't really there because people want that black box to reduce their premiums. But with something like a collision repair or collision recovery solution, there's no real incentive for the driver to have that on board, and it will take a number of years before the majority of drivers have it on board. So, one approach is what we call the transparent Trojan horse. Now, if you imagine the Trojan horse, people like the horse, and inside could be something that they don't like, that springs out at them. But the transparent Trojan horse, if you see it as the horse itself is what attracts the driver, the proposition, the reason why they install, the reason why they use the solution on their smartphone. And the bit inside that normally jumps out and bites you or throws a spear through you is the solution that will help them through FNOL, triage, etc., at the point of collision when they really need it. So, when you're looking at these things, you've got to go beyond the driving experience itself. People only spend, relatively speaking, a small amount of time in their vehicles. And to Doug's point about these huge masses of data that people are creating themselves or having created for them, they live in a big digital world. We call it a personal digital ecosystem, the PDE. So this big PDE contains so much information, people don't really care if it exists in the car or if it exists out of the car. They just know it exists. They want the value from it, per Doug and other points as well. The customer wants to control this personal digital ecosystem. You can subdivide it to have a driver personal digital ecosystem, and that will help make sort of informed choices within the car environment. Now, I'll just flip across to here. This is an example of using a driver personal digital ecosystem. Now, if it's a wintry day or the weather forecast suggests there's going to be snow, chances are you receive an email from your insurer saying, buy winter tyres, or you should change your tyres. To us, that's what we call Prevention 1.0. This is about preventing accidents or collisions. It's very general. They don't really mind who receives this warning. It's a general blanket warning on preventing a collision or preventing incidents. When you start personalizing that, when you start getting information about their location, the driver's location, their behavior patterns, if there's this behavioral passport available, or some other personal information, then you can start giving live alerts or live suggestions on how to drive, where to drive, when to drive, etc. If you look at the sat-nav with like TomTom Live, for instance, that's similar in terms of there's a lot of data. They know where other people are, other congestion is, and where you are, and they can make that recommendation where to go. So we call this Prevention 2.0, and we're in conversations with lots and lots of insurers because they see this as really interesting. We've done lots and lots of research asking drivers, and drivers, when you ask them, think, well, why aren't insurers doing this anyway? It is an answer to the insurer's question in terms of how do we better engage our drivers, and it's a driver's panacea in terms of I don't want to get into an accident in the first place, and if an insurer can help me, then that's brilliant. Connect those together, and you may be able to sort of leverage one off the other in terms of reducing premiums. And it's an interesting way that we found that allows the consumer to accept profile behavior around driving, because all of a sudden this data is helping them on a day-to-day basis, potentially avoiding accidents. And if you can translate that across to a behavior profile, and they can say, well, here's a discount. Our business in Jenin creates propositions to allow drivers to do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. And that's an example. So it's a clever way of manipulating the behavior versus incentivization, and then linking that through to a business model. So, recovery, not as we know it. In terms of smartphones, the reason why we are so focused on smartphones and not black boxes for our work, again, they go wherever drivers go. They're great at creating intelligence from the data around the personal digital ecosystems. The technology is always current. Most people change their smartphones annually, every 2 years, maybe even every 6 months, or when a really good flash iPhone 6, iPhone 7, Galaxy S4 comes out. They're confident and familiar with the technology. They trust it. Trust is absolutely important. And if an insurer or another organization can facilitate a service with a smartphone, this trusted item, and support it with an incentivized business model, then from our research and our experience, it changes everything. And there's also potential to integrate with in-car tech, such as the MirrorLink stuff, the stuff that mirrors what you've got on your smartphone in a bigger, clunkier interface, so it allows you just to push it and reduce incidents or risk of incidents. In terms of the themes that we're developing the propositions around, helping drivers do the right thing at the right time, lowering the annual cost of motoring. Now, if you look at all the research, if you focus on motoring, if you focus on what irritates people or annoys people the most, it's the cost of motoring. But there are ways to reduce that for them, not just through insurance. We're working on what we call a motoring cost minimizer. It's a bit like an aggregator that works on a little bit of layer of intelligence in terms of this driver needs this solution or these tires or this service at a particular time, and it gets the best deal within a radius of where they're happy to be. And they get a score at the end of a month, and basically it translates into how much they've saved. The insurers love this because at the point of renewal, it says, you've saved $280, pounds, euros with this motoring cost minimizer. If they go into an aggregator, that compares extremely well with what they expect to save the next year versus what they're paying less if they change from that insurer to another insurer. So the retention goes sky high. And again, making car ownership social and fun, bit of a tricky one, double-edged sword. Clearly, fun means, I don't know, less focus, more distraction. So, we have to be really careful in terms of how fun. But car ownership and fun can go outside of the vehicle as well. We're working on, for instance, it sounds a little bit strange, but if you think of how you can accessorize a car, if you can accessorize that car in a virtual sense, so if you say to your friend, look at my car, looking it through the smartphone, and you've decked it out, so it's only decked out in a virtual reality sense, people love it. And you can tag cars, so quite literally, if you're walking down the street, you get a buzz on your smartphone, get your smartphone out, and someone's plain old Ford car is super decked out if you look through the smartphone. It's that kind of really interesting social fun aspect that makes people connect the meaning of smartphones. And again, as soon as you can offer these sort of solutions, then you engage people in a totally different way. And again, the other area that we're working on is making driving safer and more predictable. In terms of the collision repair industry, it's essentially, it's up to you to look at your strengths. As Doug said, I think as Paul also said, you have unique strengths, phenomenal strengths. You know vehicles. People don't buy cars so they can get to know their insurers. People buy cars because they love their cars. You know things about their cars that they don't know and insurers don't know. You need to connect that. Again, not thinking typical, let's add servicing to collision repair. But if you start thinking outside the box in terms of some of the examples I've just given about, more social, more propositions, then all of a sudden you pull consumers tighter to you and they refer you and you create a really interesting, engaging network of customers. You're in control of the repair, so, you are the fountain of all knowledge. So maybe there's something you can do there. And again, you have local presence, friendly face, personal attention, and helpful advice. My advice, again, I'm not from the collision repair industry. I've spoken to quite a few of you over the last day or so, is possibly get a diverse, digital-focused team together. Now, it could be something David organises, it could be something that you organise separately, but it's important that diversity is the key. And then you need to get together what you know about drivers. If you don't know enough about drivers, get someone else about drivers, because drivers, especially 17 to 25-year-old drivers, they think so differently. And even their thinking on privacy is changing every 6 months. They're willing to trade privacy. You've got to know how these drivers function, what they're prepared to do. So if you create lots of insight from this group, form a digital team, create the insight about your own industry and similar and associated elements, mix it all together, and you'll find that some really interesting developments occur. And you ultimately will be in a really strong position to refine or maybe even reinvent your business models. And the kind of thing I was talking about before in terms of the propositions that maybe seem to be outside of the box are the kind of things that you come to. But you've validated them. There's less risk. You've created them together, so therefore it's not a case of someone like me jumps in and says, how about this? You don't know anything about the business. Jump out again. It just gives you that confidence that you've created it here and you build it out. And above all, enjoy the process. Thank you very much. Could you just say one? Just say one thing. It's interesting. The comment was made earlier on about, I think you made it, with the camera in the car, monitoring the road behaviour and stuff. Our CTO, he's built the solution through a smartphone that is currently 300,000 users. And basically what it is your smartphone, you stick it in a holder and it records exactly that. But the interesting trend is that most people that are using it is Russia, Romania, Poland, etc., as you're saying. But there's a big sweep across into Spain, France, England, in terms of there seems to be, I need to record what's going on because there's so much unknown out there that I want to protect myself. So it's just interesting as an addition that it is sweeping that self-awareness about driving, what's happening. I need to protect myself. That's sweeping across into the UK. Thank you.
So I want to try this, wrap this up so that people can actually touch what you're talking about.
Yep.
The first thing is that you're basic. It sounds a bit unkind, but you're sort of dismissing in the short term eCall. eCall
Yep.
is basically, as I understand it, so everybody understands what we mean by eCall. I'm driving along in my car that has eCall fitted.
Yes.
I have an accident.
Yes.
There are sensors in the car that collect data together
Yep.
and send those messages through to a central command,
Yep.
which deploys ambulance, fire, repair, pickup truck, according to the severity of the accident.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is now being built into higher end vehicles, particularly.
Absolutely. And to your point earlier on, before you ask the question, I'll just fire it back. Insurers will lose out because the manufacturers are controlling the technology. So they essentially have first choice on what happens to that data, that information.
Which is why this German insurer was saying, hang on a minute, I don't like this.
Exactly. And the greatest interest for what we're doing is from the insurers because they can counter that.
Right.
Because whereas eCall is going to be in a small percentage of cars over the next few years, potentially 60% of a insurer driver user base can have a similar solution tomorrow as soon as they get the message out. And they can take that control. And if you wrap lots of other interesting elements around it, then when eCall does come in, the driver may just not focus on that.
Okay. You used some terms earlier that not everybody might be familiar with. FNOL.
Yep.
Which is, if you tell everybody?
First notification of loss. So in other words,
Yeah, it's first contact.
Yeah.
And triage.
Yeah.
Which is a medical term.
Yeah.
Which is all about analysing what the damage is and then deciding which route it goes into. So in a medical term, it's do they go into a 24-hour bed, do they get patched up and sent home, or do they go into the operating theatre?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What you're saying then is that, if we get down to it, the use of smartphone with intelligent applications are going to put the driver more in control.
Yeah.
And the insurer is supporting this because at least they might have some control over the consumer.
At the moment, but again, one of the reasons why I'm here today is to understand from a collision repair industry basis how they could support it. Because the only reason, to be blunt, that we're going with insurers is because they have a really quick way of distributing the solution to as many drivers as possible. Now, again, one of my weaker areas of understanding is how the collision repair industry could benefit from that and also could participate. So again, obviously I'll get more insight as I have conversations.
Well, we can sell you some intelligence.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can.
Yeah. But what you're saying is compared to telematics, that what Doug was talking about is a sort of big brother, and what you're talking about is where the consumer accepts it more and becomes more involved.
Yeah, go towards want. Actually want rather than need. There's need.
Because it's on a phone?
There's need here, there's want. Well, it's not just because it's on the phone. The phone presents a really interesting interface because most people that have been monitored and metered like to see what's being checked, like to see a summary of it. And if it's on their phone, it's brilliant because it's easy. So they like that smartphone interface with typical telematics. But that is something that they will always have in the background. It's a utility. They don't care where it comes from as long as their premium is as low as it can be.
Is it likely, just to confuse matters, that the type of application you're talking about is going to come underneath the umbrella of telematics?
It is.
So is that good or bad?
Well, it's good for the driver, and that's the important thing, because, again, my goal, the business goal, is to get as many drivers in a position where they can prevent collisions and get very, very VIP response if they have a collision.
Right.
And as I said before, we made the decision not to go for the pricing-based telematics side, but go for the collision, because there's so much wastage and leakage in terms of collisions and standard claims.
Right. Well, we don't normally do this, which is go backwards in a presentation. Okay, it's not something we do, but I'm going to make an exception in your case. I really wanted to find out, a diverse digital team. I mean, what you're saying to the room is, to embrace technology, you effectively need to remodel your business.
Rethink and remodel, yeah.
Rethink first, yes. Okay. Rethink first.
Yeah. And when I say diverse, I don't mean diverse digital expertise. I mean, the theme is digital and the team is diverse.
All right. You've got a room here of people from over 35 countries.
Yeah.
There's a number of people in the room that probably don't quite get this.
Okay.
Right, because they're saying, what's digital? Why is digital in inverted commas?
Okay.
What does it mean? Could you try and just firm up? Because this is quite important. This is all about taking an action away from a conference as a result of information gleaned.
Yeah.
You're making a suggestion of what you can do with that.
Yeah.
Can you try and rebundle that into something that everybody could understand?
Okay. Your business today relies upon a limited amount of technology and ultimately less participation with the consumer, the driver. Over here, in the future, increasingly towards the future, that's going to shift, and there's going to be more data outside your control and also within the control of the consumer. So ultimately, it's what I, as a driver, want. I control the information, and it's up to you to actually say, well, we need to understand how that will look. We need to understand what the pros and cons are for our industry. We need to understand what the opportunities and risks are for that. So it's predicting what's going on, using the evidence, using the insights, the driver insights, the insurer insights, creating a map, essentially, of what's going to happen in terms of the driver over the next few years, and then doing something about it.
Right, okay, so it's very much a case of saying, look, this is going to happen, whichever way, whichever company is going to develop something, it's going to happen. You're saying, embrace it, don't complain about it or fight against it. Mm-hmm. Because there's one interesting thing you said about the way that the app works in terms of being an aggregator, which an aggregator is for those who don't speak English as a natural tongue, where you bring together information comparing costs on a particular proposal.
Yes.
You said that on this application there is a way of drivers saving cost by sourcing accessories, presumably service, presumably parts, and presumably body repair.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how does our industry embrace that?
Again, all I can see is a trend from an outsider's perspective. And the people I talk to, the evidence I see is that because the cost of motoring is growing and is significant, preferences in terms of how people deal and spend on their vehicles is changing. So, in other words, for instance, where I live, there are so many cars now with dents, small dents, whereas 5 years ago, they'd be fixed, purely because people don't want to spend any extra cash on fixing dents. And also, some of the research we're doing suggests that larger collision damage is also being left that would normally go to the insurer because people can't afford the excess. So that's being left. So the trend is for a lot of people out there that need bodywork that aren't incentivized or they don't know how to go about it in an economical manner. So this kind of solution, you're right, can be used in terms of, well, there's something I need doing. What is possible? My expectations are that it's going to cost me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds or euros or dollars to get that fixed. What is the truth? So you can use this solution to say, okay, the truth is it's going to be £200 or 200 euros. I'm going to go for it. So it has the potential to increase business.
Yeah, in many countries around the world, that part of the market is the fastest growing market. That is, that doesn't go through an insurance company. I suspect there might be some entrepreneurs from the UK, repairers, who will come and find out where you live so they can go and target all those cars that are damaged to try and get some business.
I'll hide my business card then.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Any questions for Chris? Yep. Can we have a microphone, please? Right in the middle. Thank you.
Hi, this is Joseph from Spain. There is a paradox, and that is that smartphones can help the drivers, but at the same time, what I perceive as a repairer, as also as a driver, is that every day we see accidents caused by drivers checking the smartphone while they're driving. 15 years ago, the manufacturers...
I totally agree. And there's increasing evidence that there is a connection. I mean, common sense says there's a connection, so who needs evidence? Common sense is there. And again, our business predicts that within 2 years, well, we work to the point that within 2 years, use of smartphones within vehicles in terms of pressing buttons and icons will be prohibited. Right? It may or it may not.
Prohibited to make sure...
Banned.
Banned.
Illegal. Right? Not acceptable by law. So if you flip that over and say, okay, what do we need to do as a business to facilitate that, assuming it's right? And what we're doing is we're focusing massively on the interface. So it's the interface, it requires very little pressing. It's voice. It's not complex voice. So there's not a case of, well, did it hear me? Let me turn my head away. Let me check. It's all this really clever, intuitive interface. So that's what we're working to, because we're predicting within 2 years.
Although there has been some recent research that said that even with voice commands, people are still being diverted from driving.
That's right, absolutely. But again, there are voice commands, and there's a lot cleverer way of doing it. And it's just saying that we're working to a clever way.
Right.
And so a lot of the concern is a case of, well, checking in your head. Has it got me? Has it understood me? Has it interpreted me? If you can reduce as much as possible to that, then you can focus on driving.
Okay, so the point is that Joseph is making is that, great, I can see that. Yeah. You've already predicting that actually you're ahead of the game, that we won't be allowed to use smartphones in cars as a result probably of more accidents happening because of people being diverted.
Yeah. And I think it's an honourable goal to have, and it may or may not happen.
Well, Chris is around for the next couple of days, and bearing in mind that if you're asking him for information, he will be doing the same for you, because he wants to pump all of you for some free information. But Chris, again, another view to the future, another view that that technology, in a different way, is going to affect the way that we actually not repair the cars, but get ourselves involved in the process, particularly around consumer choice. Hooking up with the consumer is absolutely vital here.
It is.
Okay. Chris Deninson, thank you very much. Chris, thank you.